Well, hello again. Thanks for coming out. I hope that you'll be glad that you did. Father, we just lift this time to you, that you would have your way. Communicate to us what you want us to know. And may our hearts be open. Amen. So I have an arrow here. And when we experience a painful event, which we will and do, it's like getting shot with an arrow. It's going to hurt. When you have a breakup, a loss, a death, a big change, it hurts. That's life, right? But what can happen is that the arrow gets pulled out. In other words, the intensity of the pain lets up after a while, usually. But the arrowhead can be left in your body, causing problems for years. This is what happens when grief is not processed and when there's not support for the person who's grieving. So I like to think of it as necessary pain or clean pain. That's the pain that just does come with loss. There's no avoiding it. No one can take that away. That it will hurt. But then there's unnecessary pain or dirty pain that comes with not processing it well or not having support or not applying our faith, not turning to the Lord in our times of distress. Those things are like the arrowhead getting stuck in your body and causing all kinds of problems from that point on. So that is my goal, is to reduce unnecessary suffering through grief education. So I welcome your questions along the way. I will stop at the end of a couple of the sections here that we're covering and invite questions. And at the very end, if you have some questions that are very personal, we'll stop the recording and you're welcome to ask those. Maybe you'd rather that not be recorded. So we'll stop the recording and ask for any further questions at the end that may be of a more personal nature that you wouldn't want recorded, okay? So we're looking at more, again, at what grief looks like, and then how you can grieve well, and then how we can support grieving people. That's what we're talking about. So I'm going to start with some questions this afternoon. What are some other things besides the loss of a human that are significant losses that we grieve over? Go ahead and say some things out. Loss of a job.
Loss of a pet.
A pet. Yep. Relationship, like a breakup or a divorce. A church breakup, yes.
Body part.
Yes, a body part, including your brain or a loved one's brain, right? Dementia. Sure. Mm-hmm. What was it? Housing, yes.
Loss
Of a dream, yeah. Health, absolutely. Yeah, so mostly I'm talking about death of people here. Those are the illustrations I'm using, but we understand that there's grief. We grieve throughout life often with these different things. So let's think about some of the types of death and how they're unique to experience that type of death. So let's start with, you're an adult and a parent dies. What is unique about that kind of a death for the person who's experiencing grieving? What's unique about it?
It's expected.
Okay, yep. It can be, yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, that person's been there your whole life, and then all of a sudden they're no longer there.
Yeah, long history with them, and people can feel like anchorless, right? I always had my mom and my dad to go to, and they were just always there. And now especially if two of them are gone, the second one is gone. Yes?
When the second one is gone, the realization that you are an orphan.
You're an orphan. You're on your own now. Yep, absolutely. Now let's think about when you're a minor and you lose a parent. What would be unique about that kind of a death?
Can you repeat that?
You're a minor and you lose a parent?
Your home situation and your provision is on.
Yep, right.
So can you repeat what they're saying?
Okay, that was your home situation is, how'd you put it in? And provision, yep. It's, we call those secondary losses.
Could be abandonment too.
Feeling of it being abandoned, sure. Worrying about your future, yep. Yeah, anger. And anger can be part of all of these. It usually is, yes. But that one especially, I suppose. Yes?
Emotional trauma.
Yeah, emotional trauma. All right, and I know we're not going to cover each of these thoroughly, but I just wanted to give you a feel for there's some real different dynamics with these different kinds of death losses. What about losing a child? What is unique about that? Can I ask this question, if it's not too personal? How many of you have had a child die? We had just about three or four? Okay, 5. What is unique about that? How is that different than other kinds of losses?
You think it should not happen.
There you go. Unexpected. Yes. Yes. And that's true for a child losing a parent. Also, it's out of order would be one way to put it. This is not how it's supposed to go. Yeah, okay. Someone died at 90, you kind of expect that. You don't expect your child to die before you. Or as a minor, you don't expect your parent to die when they're still raising you. Okay. Anything else? What's unique about losing a child?
Failure and a sense of loss of the life that they didn't get.
Yes. The life they did not get. Failure. Right. Yeah, they'll never be married. They'll never have children, or if they're young, or even if they're not, there still was a future there that's not going to happen, right? Do you have something?
Just go along, wonderment.
Yeah. Yes, that's often an issue. I kind of referenced it in my situation with my mother. We decided not to do extra means to keep her alive, and that was really hard for me. That's why I had nightmares about it, like she was still alive, and I'm sure that was the root of it, like feeling guilty about that. And those are hard decisions, and because partly, and you may not be in the greatest state to make those decisions, right? You're upset. You're already beginning the grieving process, and your mind and heart are not quite right. It makes it even harder to make those decisions then. Yeah, and let's do one more. Let's do a sibling. What's unique about losing a sibling, whether you're young or older?
During COVID, not being able to have closure and marry.
Yes, yeah, that caused a lot of issues. Not being able to have a service or burial, yeah.
The chain is broken.
Okay, the chain is broken. Yes.
Sometimes you can lose a child when they cut you off.
Yes. Yes.
And then they no longer talk to you as if there's a death.
Yes.
No closure, there's no communication, it's just nothing.
Good point. Yep. And let's talk about a couple other things. Let's talk about the difference between a sudden death. In my case, my dad died suddenly. Boom, heart attack, he's dead. Wasn't expected. My mom was a little longer. She was in a coma for 10 days. Other people have a cancer situation where it's years maybe of decline. So let's think about the difference there. What is unique about a situation where it's sudden and unexpected? Shock. Absolutely. Yes.
I had an uncle it was my mom's brother, and died of a sudden heart attack, no warning, no announcement, and died before his dad.
Right. Yeah.
That was my grandfather, lived to 96. I don't know how old Leslie was, but yeah, it was shocking. I remember hearing that. Wow.
How about the death that's not sudden, but can come with a long decline?
A little more closure sometimes.
Okay, a little more closure because you had time. We call that anticipatory grief. You know it's coming and you're beginning to grieve. And that's a good thing in a way. Okay?
Yeah, but then for me, it was a real, we waited a long time for my mom to pass. And I thought I was all done. I thought I was fine. You know, but then I wasn't. It just hit me.
Okay. So, in other words, are you saying that you thought you'd already grieved and that when she died you wouldn't grieve anymore, but it was really a double hit? Yeah. That's often people's experience. I've heard that a lot. Right. Also, the drain. If this is a person that you're caring for over who knows how long of a period of time, wow, that'll take it out of you, right? Seeing them decline and you being involved in their care really be draining. Okay, one more question. This isn't all questions today. What would be unique about a death by suicide?
Guilt, you didn't prevent it.
Yes, and the guilt, regret, it's not just the people that are closest to the person who died that feel that. It's people who are acquaintances, like, why didn't I pick up on this? Could I have done more? Could I have been taken to lunch or listened better? So the regret, the guilt is just so widespread in suicide. Yes.
There's a moral, theological issue, too.
Mm-hmm.
Does the person who commits suicide get to go to heaven?
Right. So that question, if they were a professing believer, they still, okay.
So when I was going to school for massage therapy, one of the students in our class, she was going to go to work, I think it was a few months. Oh no, it was more than that. It was like more than half a year after we graduated. And a friend of mine that went to school with me, we were working for the same place, and then we heard that she was coming. She got interviewed, and she was coming and was going to work with us. And so we were like, oh, wow, one of our alumni, was going to be with us. And before she even came, she ended up taking her life.
Mm-hmm.
And we were like, well, wow. Mm-hmm. That was quite a shock.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
We were expecting her to come and, be part of our team.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Along the same lines of the theological question, there's like this social stigma about it.
Yes, big time. Good point. So for the family, no one knows what to say. So they can feel really isolated. Or people will say these pat answer things, trying to comfort them that don't work, So that's a good point. Yeah, and we'll get into things to say and not say too. So let's talk about children and grief a little bit. Children grieve in spurts. They can't handle the kind of grief that adults experience. They'll be playing, and adults will think, oh, it's not impacting them. Look, they're off playing. But this is just the way they handle it differently. They still grieve. Some of the things you want to look for if it's a child is changes. Any kind of changes, whether it's in sleep or behavior and attitudes, you want to notice those things as signs that maybe they need help processing things. For me, I did two very common things. I isolated. That's the first thing I did. I isolated. And the second thing I did was I acted out. I had never been a particularly troublemaker, but I went through a season of about a year and a half in high school where I was trying to be the class clown and getting into trouble and things. And this had never been my history. And I sometimes look back and think, did anyone notice this and see what was going on? It's kind of puzzling to me, but this is a long time ago. All right. Yes.
Well, I was wondering also about newborns, because when I was born, I was separated from my birth mother, and nobody got it. That, that there was a connection there.
Oh, uh-huh.
So in those days, they didn't really notice anything was going on.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I guess it's different today, but
Yeah.
what would you look for?
Huh. Also, just we have this tendency to want to protect kids from death. That might mean let's not take them to the memorial service. That might mean let's not tell them what really happened, particularly if it is a suicide, for example, or a murder or something like that, or even an accident, a violent accident. We have a tendency to not be totally honest with them, and I don't think that's a good idea. You have to consider their age and be age appropriate in what you say, but honesty is the best policy. Now, in seeing a body, that's another issue. Should they go to a viewing? And that, I think that that's individual, that depends on the family and the child, but if you do go to a viewing, there are some things that can help prepare that child for what they're going to see. So you don't just drop them in. And I think it's generally a good idea, but if the child doesn't want to, if the family doesn't want to, then no one should be pushing for it. But I just want to say, in general, honesty is the best policy with kids, not protecting them from reality. They'll learn later that they were lied to, if they were lied to, and then they won't trust you, if you're a parent or a grandparent. Talk about the difference between men and women and how they grieve. There's been some studies by a psychologist named Tom Golden, and he found that, and the reason I bring this up partly is I've seen couples who have lost a child, and they grieve very differently, and they judge each other for how they do that. So I think even though there's differences among women and men, obviously not all men grieve the same, not all women grieve the same, but there are some tendencies, I'll put it that way, with exceptions. So for example, men are more likely to grieve through their actions. Motion brings the grief up rather than maybe a sit-down, face-to-face kind of, how are you feeling? Generally, men are going to be more receptive to, let's go and do something and talk while we're doing it, instead of a face-to-face thing. The men tend to think more and cry less, and I know there's exceptions to this, but and men also often have a desire to bring honor to the deceased person, to honor them. So let's talk about physical things. One of the reasons grief is so hard is because you don't just tell your brain, oh, they're gone now, and the brain accepts it. The brain has a place for your loved one, and it doesn't just get erased. So, how many of you heard of the idea of phantom pain? Phantom pain is when there's an amputation, let's say a leg is amputated, and phantom pain is when that person who's had their leg amputated still feels pain, say in their foot, that does not exist. Their foot is killing them, and it's not there, but it's in the brain. To the brain, that foot still exists. That's why they can experience pain in the foot that doesn't exist. So it is with grieving. You have a place in your brain for that person, and your brain just doesn't go delete when they're gone. That's one of the reasons grieving is so hard. Your brain takes time to adjust to the loss. I think of this little example. I changed where I put my towels in my bathroom after I shower from the door to the wall. And for months, I get out of the shower and go to the door. It's stored in my brain, right? So same thing here. And so it's like your brain is searching. You know those little circles that come up on your computer or your cell phone when it's trying to find a network or something? Spinning circles. It's like your brain is searching for that person. It's going to take time. So there's a physiological reason that grieving is hard. Also, when there's the shock of a loss, you tend to go into a fight, flight, or freeze mode in your body. It's a threat to your body. That initial response will resolve eventually. But so grieving can weaken your immune system. It can produce inflammation. You're more likely to get an infection. You're more likely to get an illness because of this. In my own case, my mom kept a journal, and I was reading it a while back, and I noticed that it said, Ed, that's me, Ed's allergies are terrible this year. That was the summer or spring after my dad died. And I thought, interesting. It's like my body was expressing the grief that wasn't being expressed in me in other ways. Just yesterday, a study was reported out of Denmark that people who have a lot of grief symptoms over a long period of time are twice as likely to be dead in 10 years as those who don't. So you take the general population and you compare them with a person who has had a loss and has struggled with that loss and is still having grief, like after a few years they're still having a lot of grief symptoms. Those people are twice as likely to be dead in 10 years as the other. So it has a physical toll. So what can you do to help your body and your heart? And some of these are hard to do because you may not feel like it. So you may have to wait a little bit till the initial shock resolves. But exercise, physical movement, making sleep a priority, even though you can't sleep at first, as much as you can, make sleep a priority. Good nutrition, social connections. May not feel like that either, and it's okay to limit it. Pleasurable activities, and obviously connecting with God in Scripture and prayer. I think we touched a little bit on secondary losses just a bit ago. That it's not only the pain of losing someone, but the stuff that comes with the loss of that person, like economic change, for example. What are some things you think of that could be a secondary loss? Someone's gone, well now also you've lost this. What might some of those things be?
You lost what they used to do for you in the household.
Yes, yeah. Maybe they mowed the lawn, or they, whatever it is, they fix things, or they, whatever. Now that's no longer, so that's a loss, a secondary loss, yes.
You might have to eat by yourself, so you don't want to eat anymore because they're not there, and so it's less painful to just not eat.
Okay, good. So eating, you've lost a partner in eating. And in sleeping, by the way, too. That's often an issue. I'm alone in my bed now. Don't want to go to bed. Okay, other secondary losses?
Purpose or a sense of identity, like especially with long-term care situations.
Absolutely. Yep. And who am I now? Let's say it's a widow. You know, I was married to this man and we had this identity together. Now who am I? Or same with a child. You know, I was this, now I don't have a dad anymore. I don't have a mom anymore. Who am I? It does throw you into, it can throw it into identity crisis. In my situation, I got to show you a picture. Here I am at, I'm not sure what age, maybe 12 or something like that. And this is me as a senior in high school. It does reflect the changes that happened in me. Oh, I forgot to pass these out. I'll get that in a second. So, yeah, we haven't written anything yet. Okay, I'll give you a handout. Okay, thank you. So everything changed in my life. My emotions changed. My thoughts changed. My schoolwork changed for the worse. My friendships changed for the worse. My health changed. My relationship with my mom changed. My relationship with my older siblings changed. Our family income changed. My spiritual beliefs changed. I became an atheist. Those are all secondary kind of losses. And speaking of that, a crisis of faith also often happens. Maybe especially if you were praying for healing, and some people would say, we had assurance that they'd be healed, and they aren't, and they die. Now, who is this God that I serve who didn't answer my prayers? Right? So, how could God do this to me? So this can create a spiritual crisis that will go one way or another. It can lead to intimacy with God because the deepest, richest, closest experience we have with the Lord are in times of pain. Or it can lead the opposite way and say, I'm not interested in a God who allows this kind of suffering. So often a crisis of faith happens. Okay. I've prayed for, I talked to a lot of people who walked away from their faith because they prayed for healing and the healing didn't happen in a particular life. So, all right, so that's kind of more about grief. Let's get into how we can grieve well, how we can process grief. Now, some of us act as if grief is a result of the fall, the curse. I want to suggest that emotions, we think anger and sorrow are part of the curse. But I look at it this way, Genesis 1:27, so God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. And what was his assessment? It was good. Part of the way that we're created in the image of God is that we're created with emotions, including sadness, sorrow, anger. Those are not to be looked at as part of the curse. They're actually gifts that can teach us about ourselves and things that we need to experience rather than hate and push down. Psalm 139 speaks that we're fearfully and wonderfully made. And if you look and study the Hebrew, which I know you love to do here, you'll find out that that's specifically speaking of your emotions. Fearfully and wonderfully made. So emotions are God's idea. I was sitting in a dentist's chair one time and leaning back as you do at the dentist's office and looking up at the ceiling, and there was a poster on the ceiling, which is smart for dentists to put posters on the ceilings, right? And the poster said, "Ignore your teeth and they will go away." There's very few things that go away if you ignore them, and emotions is not one of those. And the emotions that come with grief, they don't go away because you ignore them. They may change, but they don't go away. So let's talk about some things that don't work in terms of how to process your grief. One would be just to say, well, time heals all wounds. Just give it time. Yes, time is an asset. Time does help. But if you think of a physical injury, I injured my knee in early March, and if I had not gone to a doctor who removed fluid from my knee, and if I had not gone to physical therapy and done the exercises, I don't know if my knee would be healing. You've had physical things happen that time did not heal, right? That can be true for grief. Time is an asset if you do the right things with the time. But time in itself doesn't necessarily bring complete healing. Another thing that doesn't work, be strong for others. That's what my mom tried to do. She thought, I need to be strong for the family. And she told my sister later she didn't cry because of that. And when she wanted to cry later, she couldn't. Another one is just stay busy. Now, there are times when busyness is okay because we do need to live our life and be busy. We need to vacillate maybe between the grief and life. That's good to be able to do both, but we don't want to bury our pain by being so busy that we never think about it and face it. Suppressing it, stuffing it. When we were kids, we went to the public swimming pool, and sometimes we would take a ball into the water, and some of you will know what I'm talking about. We would hold the ball under the water, and when you do that, the ball, there's a lot of pressure for that ball to come up. It's hard. It takes a lot of energy to hold it down. And if you do let it go, it goes shooting up into the air, right? So what's true about that is by holding the ball down doesn't take away that ball's effort to come up. By holding my emotions down, by suppressing them, stuffing them, denying them, doesn't make them go away. And it takes a lot of energy. Holding that ball down took a lot of energy. It also sucks the energy out of me when I am suppressing emotions. Another thing that doesn't work, medicating grief. I was isolating in my bedroom. My mom was concerned about me. She sent me to the family doctor. What did he do? He gave me a prescription. I needed to process grief. I didn't need tranquilizers or whatever it was that he gave me. By the way, this is 1970, so it's a different era that I'm talking about. But according to my sister, all of us kids were given tranquilizers right away upon the news that my dad had died. They immediately prescribed this for us. I do mentoring with adult and teen challenge students, and I can't tell you how many times when I've asked them to tell me their story, particularly when they have relapsed and they've come back into the program, I say, what happened? They said they experienced a loss, a breakup, or a death, and they couldn't handle it. And what did they do? They went to their drugs or their alcohol to numb it because they couldn't handle those emotions. But medicating grief doesn't work. So let's look at an example of a psalmist who just lays his feelings out before the Lord. This is David, Psalm 6, verses 2 to 7. Have mercy on me, Lord, for I am faint. Heal me, Lord, for my bones are in agony. My soul is in deep anguish. How long, Lord, how long? Turn, Lord, and deliver me. Save me because of your unfailing love. Among the dead, no one proclaims your name. Who praises you from the grave? I'm worn out from my groaning. All night long I fled my bed with weeping and drenched my couch with tears. My eyes grow weak with sorrow. They fail because of all my foes. There's an honest expression to the Lord of what he's experiencing, and that's a great example for us. I had, a few years ago, kept hearing about the benefits of cold showers. How many of you heard about that? Cold showers are supposed to reduce anxiety and give you more energy and things like this. And I kept hearing this over and over. And I tried it, and I not for me. Actually, I mostly didn't try it. I chickened out, got in the shower. But so then I kept hearing this, so I said, okay, I'm going to give it a shot. So I started taking cold showers, and here's what I did. I stood there with my arms folded like this, and I quoted scripture, or I counted, or I did something to distract my mind from the cold. I set my timer for 3 minutes and just got through it until it was over. And then one day I thought, I should try a different approach. What if I actually noticed the cold water hitting my body and just like tuned into, what does that feel like? And instead of, this closed posture and distracting, actually experiencing the cold, it was actually a better experience. And I want to say that's true about the painful emotions as well. They are painful, but in the end, there's less pain when we actually go through them than when we try to run from them. I'm using my dad's death as an example a lot because it illustrates so many things about grief. I didn't cry very much partly because I had an older brother and we were competitive and I wasn't about to show weakness in front of him. David Kessler, who's a leader in the grief field, said, "You can't heal what you can't feel. You can't heal what you can't feel." Now I got to tell you a personal story. I need to think about how to say this for a second. I just say something horrific happened to one of my children, and I was afraid of the anger that I would feel towards the person who did this to my child. And because I was afraid of the anger, I didn't process it. And probably 10 years later, I'm at Cannon Beach, a pastor's prayer summit. I'm due to be the leader of this session the next morning. And I wake up in the night crying uncontrollably for like an hour over what happened to my daughter that I'd learned about 10 years earlier. What happened? I suppressed my emotions and they didn't go away. And eventually they came flooding out. That's so instructive to me that stuff does get stored in you and doesn't go away if it doesn't get processed. We know this physically, that this happens. But I believe God has given us grief as a process that leads to healing. It's not what we would choose. As some people said, maybe it's because originally we weren't created with death, and death just doesn't sit well with it. That's why grief is so hard. But nonetheless, I think it is a healing process that we can welcome and say, thank you, Lord, for, and actually experience it. So our culture doesn't deal very well with grief. When this is 1970, I realize this wouldn't happen today, but it illustrates how our culture doesn't like emotions. Before my mom learned that my dad had died, she was at the hospital waiting for the news of how he was. And a nurse came up and gave her secretly, without her permission, a shot, a tranquilizer, before they told her that he had died. It's like they're saying, we don't do emotions here. And I think that's sort of reflective of our culture, You can be emotional maybe for a little bit, but that's it, please, shut it down. This one writer in the local paper in Albany wrote this a couple years ago regarding the experience of grief in our culture. He says, we pretend it's not there. We don't let it in. And so the individual and collective healing experience after a loss feels incomplete. If we grieve at all, we expect grief to be limited in its expression and have an expiration date. We have made a silent collective agreement to grieve alone or to fix grief before it makes someone else uncomfortable. That's the culture that we're living in, and sometimes the church isn't any different. We've adopted that. And as a result of this, I think one of the things that happens is, let's say you lost your husband six months ago, and someone comes up to you and says, "How are you?" And you don't want to say, I'm still devastated. It's a struggle day by day. That may be the reality, but you know that's not what they want to hear. They want to say, you got a little while to grieve and then you need to get over it. And because of that social pressure, what do? We deny where we're at. And so that's why it's so important to have people who can walk along, at least one person who can walk alongside you that you feel comfortable being honest with, that understands this is long and hard. It's not going to expire in just a few weeks or whatever. Now, the Israelites were pretty much better than we are at grieving. Do you know how long they grieved? 30 days. We see in Deuteronomy 34:8, for example, the Israelites grieved for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days until the time of weeping and mourning was over. And you know what else they did? They hired mourners to come in. Can you imagine starting a business today in Salem, Oregon? You can hire this business to come and cry when there's been a loss, and they'll hang around for 30 days and weep and wail in your home. Do you think that would be a thriving business? It'd be pretty hard to deny your emotions with that happening. So let's talk about some specific ways that we can process grief. What can you do to help the grief? David in Psalm 62 verse 8 says, trust in him at all times, O people. Pour out your hearts to him, for God is our refuge. Pour out your hearts to him. Isn't that nice to know that God invites you to pour your heart out to him? I love that. See, grief needs to keep moving through our system. I think of it like digesting food. When we ate lunch today, you had to take the food to your mouth, you had to chew the food, you had to swallow the food, and now your digestive system is digesting it. And sometimes the food gets stuck. And you get bloated, or you get constipated, you get pain because for some reason your digestive system is not processing it. And that can happen with grief. We need to process it. Grief can get stuck in us. It's meant to move through. Not that it moves completely out, but it needs to keep moving in our system. So I want to give you some specific ways that you can process grief. And this is in your sheet. WRAP. I'm all about acrostics and acronyms so you can remember stuff, because I use it to remember things. WRAP, W-R-A-P. Writing or journaling. And I'll say more about each of these. Rituals, art and music, and prayers of lament. Some of the different ways you can process. So journaling, there's something about getting it out on paper that helps move it through our system so it doesn't get stuck. Have you noticed that? Just the stuff you're dealing with. If you can write it, if you can journal it, address it to the Lord, it helps that move through your system. Creating rituals. That could be a memory box. It could be a scrapbook. It could be planting a tree in somebody's name. It could be eating their favorite food on holidays or whenever. It could be starting a scholarship in their name. And so many different things you could do. There are rituals, and those all help you keep the grieving process moving through your system. Expressing it in art. You might draw, you might paint, you might hang a picture, you might keep a picture that they loved, or you might find a picture that reminds you of that person. You might do woodworking if that's your thing. Anything that you're inclined to in the way of arts and crafts can be a way of processing. Also music. Playing music, if you can write a song, wow, that would really be good. Listening to your loved one's favorite songs. Listening to songs about sorrow. And then prayers of lament. Do you know there's at least 42 psalms of lament in the book of Psalms? And when you categorize them, no psalms probably are, well, I don't say no, but a lot of psalms are a mix of things. But some people have up to half of the psalms as prayers of lament. A prayer of lament is when you, in your pain, express it to God and get hope and healing through that expression. Prayers of lament. Psalm 13 is a prayer of lament, and I have another acronym for you. It's not on your sheet, but you can write it down if you like it. I call it spiritual CPR. CPR. This is what Psalm 13 is spiritual CPR. So this is David, and the verses 1 and 2. This is the C part. How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? That's complaint. That's complaint. That's the C is complaint. So he brings his complaint to God. And then P, see if you can guess what P is. Verses 3 and 4. Look on me and answer, Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. And my enemy will say, I've overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall. P is the prayer request, or pray. So we have the complaint, and then we have the prayer, the request, CP. And then we have R. Verses 5 and 6, but I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord, for he has been good to me. That's rely. Another word for trust. CPR. These are prayers of lament. Take your complaint to God. Pray your request. State your reliance on him or your trust in him. It's a beautiful thing God has given us that we can do. Now, I'm going to turn my back to you because I want to demonstrate the letter U. There's a psychologist, I think he is named Allender, that came up with this, and I've kind of adjusted it and made it my own. So the letter U, what I want you to do is I want you to draw a big U with your finger, okay? Now, back on the left top, this is you in distress. And over here on the right side on the top, this is you having experienced some relief, some healing, some victory, okay? You're trying to get from here to here. And what you have to do, this left side represents feelings. You have to dip down into the pain. What we want to do is we want to take a shortcut and go straight across. I want to get from the pain and the sorrow right to the victory and the joy and the healing. But it's like it's not crossable. You can't cross that space. You have to go down into the pain, experience the pain, express the pain through the things we're talking about, writing and prayers of lament and so forth. And then you can get up to the other side and get some healing and some relief. So it's like the letter U, but you can't avoid going down into the pain, experiencing it. Any questions about, because we're going to move to supporting people next. Any questions about how to process grief? Yes?
I guess, like, hypothetically, something happens and you're in a situation where you don't believe you have time to grieve.
Happens.
Because you have all these obligations you have to do, like,
Yep.
someone dies, but now you have to do something.
Yep.
Is it, like, how, like, what would be a good time to say enough is enough? Or, like, does it matter to the person? Is it as soon as someone else can do what I need to do? Like,
Right. Good point. Excellent point. Excellent question. So the question is, sometimes you don't have the freedom to grieve. You're too busy. What if you are a parent of young children? What if, what if you're a spouse and now you got to plan a funeral, you got to think about a gravestone, you got to think about contacting Social Security, you got to think about social media and passwords and contacting family and letting them know. And suddenly you have this massive to-do list. Or maybe you are at work and you're in the middle of a project that you have to finish. And it's demanding your time, right? Something like that. So what can you do? There are times when you have to just say, I don't have enough time to grieve as I would like. And so I think you do what you can with that. And sometimes you do have to put it on hold, but through no choice of your own, because the circumstances you're in just don't allow you to do it. And that happens. That's realistic. So that's a great question. I do think that hopefully you can do a little bit, squeeze a little bit in there of this processing where you can, when you're really busy and don't have a lot of time. Yes?
I think that speaks to our society as well, not allowing us the time.
Absolutely. And there's nothing we can do about that, right? That's one of the serenity prayer again, things I cannot change. So you have to accept the reality that it's not ideal. Yeah.
This might be too much of a tangent, but if you were introduced in a culture where death is normal, typical, maybe the grieving happens all the time, but like in this culture,
Yep.
it's always surprised me when death happens and people are like shocked. And I'm sorry, just because I'm here, but I always thought people died, like from the time I was little. And I
Okay.
know, so sometimes it's hard to walk with people when it is a shock.
Okay.
Like, I guess I'm trying to just say that if there's a culture of death all the time, your response to death is different.
Yes, and so part of that is we have outsourced death to hospitals and funeral homes.
Right.
So 100 years ago or more, you'd have a dead body on your kitchen table or whatever, and kids would see it, everybody would see it, right? Or if you grew up on a farm, you got animals dying, and that's just, you understand, that's part of life. But yeah, we've definitely like separated from death, and that makes it harder because then it's a shock. And
That's a difference because culturally, like up in Canada, my mom grew up where the bodies were in the home for many days. So this is not that far back. So maybe that's why it's so different.
yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things we can't change, but all right, we're ready to move on. Do you have any more questions about like how to process grief or have to do with that? Or comments? All right, we're moving along. This is our last big topic. How can we support grieving people? So I have a story to tell you. This is a precious story to me. I grew up with a friend that lived a block away. We met when we were 6 years old. We went to the same Catholic school, so we're in the same classroom for 8 years, and we talked about everything. He was my best buddy. Last summer, he contacted me and said he wanted to get together with me and talk, just the two of us. He lives in the Dalles, I live in Lebanon. They're about over 2 hours apart. And I was going to be in the Dalles, so. He wanted to make an apology to me from something that happened more than 5 decades ago. So here's what happened back then, 1970, when my dad died. His family, Catholic family, came down to offer their condolences. They walked down the block, and he said when he walked into the house and he saw me, he froze up and didn't know what to say. His apology last summer was, I apologize for abandoning you for 2 years. That was a beautiful moment for me, but it illustrates not just what 13-year-olds often do, but what adults often do. I'm not blaming them, but people freeze up. They don't know what to say, so they do nothing. They stay away. And I think that how many people have been hurt? We talk about this arrowhead getting stuck in you and this unnecessary extra pain beyond just the pain of the loss. How many people have been hurt when a close relative or a close friend did not show up at a time of loss? But on the other hand, often unexpected people do. That you didn't, maybe not even the closest person that you would have expected, show up and are a tremendous support to you. And what a blessing that is. But what I want to not have happen with you and with us as much as possible is that not show up because you don't know what to say or do. And it is uncomfortable. Let's just acknowledge it. It'll never be comfortable walking into a situation where someone's grieving. That's hard to do. But pain is miraculously halved when it is shared. That's a quote from Maxine Harris. I have noticed that as sitting with grieving families, how much healing comes from sharing memories together. Right? You know, I'll meet with a family after there's been a death, and I'll just ask, tell me about so-and-so, and tell me some of your favorite memories. You can just feel the healing that's happening in that environment. Same thing in a service, when often it's opened up for testimonies. You can feel the healing. There's so much support in grieving together. But if I can tell a story on that same friend that apologized, about 2 years after my dad died, I had not talked about it, I had not processed it, and I thought, okay, the time has come for me to talk about this. We were on a backpacking trip, and we were in our tents. I think we're on Mount Hood. And my body was shaking as I began to talk about my feelings about my dad's death as we lay there. And I talked a little bit, and I looked over, and he had fallen asleep. It was the most vulnerable moment in my life at that point, and he had gone to sleep. And I don't know, excuse me, my voice is starting to go a little bit here. I don't know, we had, I'm sure, walked, carrying packs and everything. We were tired, but, okay, so back on 2 Corinthians 1, 3, and 4, which we visited this morning, I want you to notice who God is and why he does what he does. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles so that we can comfort anyone and comfort anyone who is, how's that go? It's a memory verse and now I'm forgetting it. Comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves have received from God. There it is. 2 Corinthians 1, 3, and 4. What that tells me is staying away is not an option, in part. Staying away is not an option for the believer. What are we to do? Rejoice with those who rejoice, and what? Weep with those who weep, or mourn with those who mourn. So staying away should not be an option for us. I avoided people and they avoided me, so it was two-way in the situation where my dad died. Let's look at how Job's friends, of course the whole book of Job is this, but I got to look at the whole book, but how they handled Job's grief started really well. This is chapter 2, verse 11. When Job's three friends, Eliphaz, the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Nahamathite heard about all the troubles that had come upon him, they set out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud. And they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him, because they saw how great his suffering was. They went 7 days in silence. Isn't that amazing? When did they get in trouble? They started talking. And what was their idea when they started talking? Job, the reason you've experienced this suffering is because you've sinned. Their only mindset was, this suffering has to be a result of your specific sin. You're not treating your workers right or something. And that's why, if you will start living a righteous life, you won't suffer anymore. That was their argument. And God wasn't having it in the end. They were wrong, and he rebuked them. But what that idea reminds me of when I was in a church in Eugene, where a friend of ours who was in his 30s, his wife was in her 30s, died of cancer. And someone said to him, the reason God took her from you, is that you didn't treat her well enough. Of course, that's some of the worst kind of things you can say. There's a danger in talking about things not to say, because it may encourage you to go, oh no, I don't want to say the wrong thing, I'll just stay away. So I don't want that to happen, but I'm going to delve into it anyway. And let me ask you, what are common things that people say, good, bad, or whatever, upon a death? What, if you've been through one, what were you told? If you've gone to somebody, what did you say to them? First time you see them after there's been a loss. Let's just throw out all the common things that are said. What are they? They're in a better place.
Sorry for your loss.
Sorry for your loss. Probably the most common one. Yep. There's lots more.
He's still with you.
He's still with you. Okay.
Trust in the Lord.
Okay. Trust in the Lord. Giving advice, spiritual advice.
He's an angel.
He's an angel. Yes, people have that idea, unbiblical idea. I'm going to go through a list. I have a list of common things people say. And I want you to ask the question, how many of these things are a way of saying, don't feel bad? Okay, because we talked about the need to process, and now we're coming and we're saying, cheer up, get out of this state, right? So they're in a better place. Now that may be true, and that may be a great encouragement to you, but is it also a way of saying, stop it, stop feeling what you're feeling, cheer up. Okay. Stifle your grief. Yep. It's time to move on. So I had a denominational official when my dad died visit me, and that was a nice thing that he visited, but this is what he said. It was like 3 days after my mom died. He said, it's time to move on. And I realized, this is your issue. It's not like I was falling apart or anything, but anyway, these are pretty bad. You need to get over it. Never say that, even if it's 10 years down the road. At least you still have your other children. Now, this is really a common thing that is said. At least you got to spend time with them. At least they didn't suffer much, if that's the case. At least she led a full life. You'll find somebody else. God will never give you more than you can handle. It's a common thing that's said. Be grateful that you had him so long. I know how you feel. Or I can't imagine how you feel. Now, these aren't all bad. So I would say the summary here is anything that could start with the word at least, you don't, that's a hint. Thank you. Appreciate that. That's a hint that you're trying to talk them out of their pain. And that's not what you need to be doing. The thing I heard told to my mom a lot was, if there's anything I can do. Now that's coming from a good heart. That's coming from a heart, I want to help. I want to do something. The problem with that is, first of all, they're in shock, so they may not know what you can do. And secondly, it puts the impetus on them to tell you, and usually that means later, contact you and take that bold, courageous step of saying, I need help, whatever they might help for. And most people will not do that. So let me suggest a better idea. Same heart that wants to help. Come, especially if you know the person well, and make some specific, one or more specific suggestions. Can I take the kids to school this week? Can I mow your lawn? Can we bring you a meal? Can I help you with your taxes if you're capable of that? Whatever. You might have a skill you can offer that would be helpful. Think about what you think they might need and ask permission to do that. It's a very specific thing. That way you're not putting it on them to get back to you and have to ask you to do something. If you are a grieving person, though, I would say take advantage of that. I don't mean in a negative way, but when people do say to you, if there's anything I can do, take a note of it. And when you are overwhelmed and can't go grocery shopping or whatever it is, call them up and say, hey, thank you for your offers. Would you be able to shop for me this week or whatever you think you need? Does that make sense? You like that idea? Here's another thing. People are afraid to bring up the name of the person who has died. Maybe because it will bring sorrow into the heart of the grieving person. And I want to say that more pain is brought by not mentioning their name than by mentioning their name. Most grieving people want to hear stories. They want to hear the name of their loved one. They want the acknowledgement of them, not you avoiding it. So I just want to encourage you, don't be afraid to say the name when a person has died to their loved ones. Oftentimes, birthdays, a lot of you know this, holidays, anniversary of the death, are hard days. Sometimes for the rest of their life, the grieving person. Sometimes, especially if it's, if a death at Christmas or Thanksgiving, even if the death wasn't then, it will never be the same on those holidays. And just know that if you want to be a supportive person, holidays and anniversaries of the death are hard for people. Generally speaking, almost always. So if you want to encourage and support them, reach out to them and give them grace. It may be that Grandma has always hosted Thanksgiving dinner and she's devastated that Grandpa is not with her anymore and she can't host and she may not even be able to show up at that Thanksgiving dinner. Give people permission to do what they need to do. So our goal is not to cheer them up, but to be with them, to show up, which says, I care and I love you. You're not going to say anything. The pressure is off. You don't need to fix grief. Grief doesn't need fixed, so the pressure is off when you're supporting people. The only pressure is show up if you're someone close to them. I've noticed that and I'm guilty of this, even in little things in life, we tend to dismiss people. Someone brings up a little worry, a little concern, a little fear, we tend to say, oh, it'll be all right. But really what needs to happen is that person needs to be heard. That emotion needs to be heard and witnessed by us. So I'm trying to do that more and more in my own life. Instead of immediately, let's just shine a bright light on this right away, let them talk. So I challenge you, even in your daily life, when people bring something they're concerned about, let them express it. You know, I have a friend that is a manager, a female friend that's a manager of a fairly large institution, and she was frustrated that her board was not allowing her to spend enough money to run her organization. There were people on there that were like not wanting to spend money. And this was frustrating her, and she was telling me this one day, and she said, but where's my faith? And there's someone in the church that's going through much worse things than I am. Basically, I shouldn't feel bad. I shouldn't feel this way. And I said to her, but this is really hard for you, isn't it? And she started crying. She needed herself to acknowledge her pain and for someone else to witness that pain. There's a lesson for me. There's a thing called compare and minimize, by the way. So compare and minimize would say, let's say your dog died and you've loved your dog and it really hurts. But your neighbor's child died. And so you say to yourself, well, I shouldn't feel bad. My dog died. Look at my neighbor. They're in much worse shape than I am. And I want to say that doesn't work. There's a reason. And we can be thankful, but pain is pain. Right? Which brings another point up that I'll say. We can't really say that certain kinds of death are worse than others across the board because everyone is different, every relationship is different. Sometimes people who lose a dog is the most devastating event for years that they'll have. Most people who have lost a child will say, there's nothing as bad as this. And that's true for most people. And losing a spouse or losing a parent as a child, those are usually really hard things. But in some cases, it's surprising the kinds of losses that really devastate people. And so don't judge people for that. If you feel like, well, that's nothing, they're hurting. And that hurt needs to be acknowledged. All right, that's a little side note. Just speaking of support, I told you about something happened to my child and how that grief came out. And I was crying in the night uncontrollably. That morning I said to the other leaders of that prayer summit, I still feel like I should lead the session. And I was a mess. I was crying and just very, very emotional. And I went ahead and told the people, there were about 65 men there, what I was going through. And they gathered around me and prayed for me, and I've never felt so much love in my life. But I really feared it. It was a very vulnerable heart. I was afraid I'd be judged for being, being weak and, things like this. But wow, I had people afterwards out, people I hardly knew I'd run into and say, how are you, But it was beautiful. It just reminds me again, we need each other. We do. You can't get around that. God made you dependent on Him and on people. So, why do you think we feel the need to take people's pain away? This need to cheer them up. Where do you think that comes from?
We don't like pain.
We don't like pain. Yeah. I don't like feeling pain, and I don't like to see you feeling pain. Either way, right? Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think it's a fear, I might catch it from you.
Wow. Okay.
I don't want that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, too, maybe their pain reminds me that something like that could happen to me. And I don't want to deal with that. Let's just cheer this up. Yeah. So what are some good things to say? I have an acrostic for that too, and it's HAP, like happy. but it's actually not happy, because we've been talking about it. We're not there to make them happy. But H is I'm here for you. These aren't in particular order. They're in order according to my acrostic here that I made up. So if that's true, I think that's a great thing to say. I'm here for you. Let them know that you're willing to support them. Walk them through this. Walk with them through this. A is anecdotes. Anecdotes. Tell stories. It's the grieving person loves to hear stories about their person, especially stories they've never heard. Or just to hear, oh, I loved his kindness or his sense of humor or her creativity or whatever it is that you whatever your memories are of them, their traits or their stories. So anecdotes, it's always appropriate, almost always. I suppose there's a few cases where it wouldn't be. But again, our tendency is to avoid that, what we really should be entering into. Did you have something? I saw your hand just a minute ago.
My hand just goes up automatically.
Oh, praise the Lord.
I remember when my husband's father's father passed away, and we were on the phone for some reason, and he called to tell, but I don't know. It was right soon after my husband's grandpa died. He was in his 90s, and he was a darling. Lived a really good life. And I remember saying to my father-in-law, well, he really lived a long time. He said to me, I don't care. I don't care. I want him to live longer.
Yes, yes.
I really got a good sense of what it's like to have my foot cut out.
Yeah. So that was a thing where you were trying to sort of look on the bright side, or at least they lived a long time, kind of a thing, reduce the pain. So it reminds me of a story I heard recently from a pastor friend. It's his daughter, who had 2 young children, died in a car accident. And the Sunday school teacher, one of these little 6 or 8-year-old, I forget, boy, says, aren't you glad your mom is in heaven? And the boy says, no. So P is I'm praying for you. I'm praying for you. That always seems like a great thing to say and a great thing to do, of course. I think what we want is we want to let them know they can talk if they'd love to. We're not going to force it, but if we're a person that they trust and would love to talk to, you're available to do that. And some of these statements can open that door. You know, when you say, I'm here for you, they might just start to say, yeah, it's been really hard, and start sharing their story, or not. The one that's most common, I'm sorry for your loss, that's not a bad thing to say. The downside to that can be that person will often say, well, don't feel bad. The grieving person turns around now is trying to comfort you because you're saying, I'm sorry for your loss. But that's a common thing to say. That's relatively safe. All right. Here's a few other tips. We need to know that there's usually an outpouring of support in the first few days, maybe week after a death, but everybody's busy and they get back to their life, and that has to be that way. And that person is then left with the new reality, like, I'm alone now. or I don't have, whatever their loss is, I don't have this person in my life, and it's setting in, and everybody's gone. They're back to their life. So if you want to be a good support to people, remember that after the first, I don't know what time we are, maybe week or so, anytime after that, for months to come, is a great time to check in with them. Because a lot of times the support has disappeared as people have gotten busy with their lives. The massive outpouring ends, and then they're on their own. So that's a great time to reach out to them. This happened to my friend I mentioned that had fell and been paralyzed. You know, the outpouring for him in his situation was really strong at first, and then he's left alone. I try to write on my calendar in 3 weeks or 3 months, check in with so-and-so. Because I've had good intentions in the past and often not followed up. So I just put it on my calendar, and that helps. So to summarize how we can support other people: show up, hush up, and listen up. That comes really from James, at least in part, James 1:19. My dear brothers, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. That's a great go-to verse for how to support people. Quick to listen and slow to speak. We're not there to give them advice. Okay, we're just coming to a close here in just a little bit. I do want to show a video that summarizes some of what we were talking about. This is from Alberta Health Services. It's secular, it's not Christian, but it's just some little clips of people. It's called that have had a death of a child, and we're going to watch about just a little over 2 minutes of this, if that works.
What I found most difficult, and I still find difficult, is people that I know and that I know knew Jeffrey, and that I know they understand everything, what happened to us in a historical sense. But it's something that we have to talk about, and either a lot of people don't want to talk about it, and I perhaps don't blame them, because I can understand why. But it's hard when people don't acknowledge what's happened. It's hard when they don't ask you that simple question, how are you doing? It doesn't have to be a big thing. It's an acknowledgement that you've been hit pretty hard, and it's pretty tough. And literally I felt on occasions difficult. I couldn't carry on conversations because the other person wasn't prepared to accept what we'd gone through.
You know, I think comments that you hear, and you hear them like, you need to accept this, you need to get on with things, and we're thinking, we don't know that we want to get on with life, let alone accepting anything. You don't know, or we felt like we have no heart to live, and to say to accept it and to move on is very cruel, because you just don't know, why are we moving on? Somebody's pulled your heart out and they say move on, and you say, well, why? I have no motivation to move on. So somehow people, this being surrounded by understanding and maybe less comments rather than more, like less advice and more just hugs when you have no words left.
I didn't.
Oh, okay, that's it. Yeah, that's supposed to end. Thank you. Yeah, that's it. It's a good video if you want to watch it. Like I say, it's secular, but It's Alberta Health Services. They have death of a child, death of a spouse, other deaths like that. I thought they were pretty good little clips. You really feel the pain of these people, can't you? Whew, really comes through strong. I'll say one thing too about when people don't show up. Some people would say you learn who your friends are, but what you really learn is who's comfortable with grief and who isn't. It's not personal. All right. So I summarize just the afternoon part. Grief needs processed, needs gone through, and there are good ways to do that. There's healthy ways to do that, and grief needs supported by other people, and there's good ways to do that as well. And your main way to support is by showing up and not by fixing the grief. There's grief share groups, and I live in Lebanon. I'm familiar with the ones there. I'm not so familiar here, but Salem is big enough. I know they exist. Grief share is a Christian curriculum that you go through. It's like 12 weeks, and you can repeat it. And a lot of people found a lot of help. There's a workbook that you do a little bit in, and then you come together and talk once a week. So there's also, if that doesn't work out, hospice often offers grief support groups of various kinds. And that would be secular, but still helpful to be with other people. What people find is when they hear other people in a group sharing what they're going through, they say to themselves, oh, I'm not the only one. And it's very encouraging to hear other people. In some cases, people further along in the process, giving them hope that I can get where they're at. They've come further than I have. So I have a book here. It looks like a children's book. It looks like a picture book you would read to a kindergartner. It's called Grief is a Mess. It's a secular book, but it really describes grief well, and it's written for adults. And nobody wants to read a book about grief when they're grieving, especially a 400-page academic treatment or something. And this takes about 5 minutes to read, and it's cute. But it really can make people feel like, yeah, I can identify with the feelings in this book. So I give this away sometimes to people. And I have a story real quick. I did a presentation on grief and loss at the Chamber of Commerce greeters meeting. And there happened to be a 12-year-old girl there that day with her dad. And they won the prize. I gave a prize away. And this book was one of the things in the prize. And that 12-year-old's best friend had just died in a car accident. And their friends passed this book around to each other. And the dad came back to me in another meeting and said, thank you so much. God is really using that in their lives. So if you're interested in that book, there's a ton of books. Another great resource that's a secular one is the Dougie Center in Portland is especially for families who've had a loss. So this would not be for just like a widow that's lost a husband, unless they have children that are still at home. But they especially focus on where families impacted by a death. And they are a national leader. They are the national leader. So kids actually get to go up there and spend time and be in a group and do things like play basketball, and they have 3 houses in the Portland area, and they have a podcast on just about every subject you could think of grief, like how schools can handle a situation, just all kinds of detailed, specific podcasts. So that's called the Dougie Center in Portland. I am available to do what I've done with you, with churches or organizations, even a business where there's been a loss that's impacted them. People find it helpful to learn about grief and kind of talk about some of these things. And so where do I have my cards? I hope I have them in here. I think I took them out to my car. I will run out and get those. So in case you know of somebody or will know of somebody in the future, feel free to refer. I'm not in this for the money. I'm in it because I love it. I just love this field because it's impacted me so much. Now, I said we'd turn, I think we've had a lot of questions, but we can turn the recording off now. And there might be a question that maybe you wanted to ask earlier but didn't because it was, you didn't want it on the recording.